Welcome to World Builders Anonymous. Kick that world building addiction and actually finish that novel with your hosts Vito and John.
You're not actually hearing that, are you? You couldn't possibly be.
No.
You don't have the track on your thing. You're just guessing.
No, I just love that song.
So now I got to go
It's
and
in my
line
head.
that up afterwards, or else you're going to look like an idiot.
Oh no, I meant to be an idiot.
I'm going to cut it
Fine.
like way after the theme music ends, and you just come in singing. Or maybe I'll just cut out the theme music entirely and let that be the intro song.
Just have me, instead of the intro song, just me going. That's perfect.
That's
yeah,
pretty
it's
funny.
great. I like it.
That's the power I have as the editor. I have
Oh,
all
boy.
the power. Okay, anyway,
I have
welcome
nothing.
to the
I have a
podcast
pawn.
today, guys. That's our intro today. Been a little lackluster in our intros recently. I think we need to put a little more effort into the intros, John. What do you say?
As if we ever put any effort into the intro.
Hey, I put all the effort into
Let's
the
be
intro. I
real.
recorded it.
That's fair enough. I
I did all my
leg to
work
stand on
already.
there.
You need to pull your weight around here. I mean, I guess you did today. You sang the song, so wait, yeah, that'll
Yeah. See, I'm
suffice.
doing my work.
Yeah,
Don't disrespect me.
that'll count for now. For now. Okay. Anyway,
Yes.
we are back after a couple weeks off. I've been flight training like crazy, as much as I can. The airplane's actually down right now, and so I've been doing mostly
Womp
simulator
womp.
stuff. But that's still fun, getting all my procedures down and everything, pressing buttons, knowing which buttons to press, when to press them, and most importantly, how to not crash. That's the number one
That is
thing.
the important bit.
When you learn
by
how
and
to fly,
large.
that's the number one thing you need to learn. That for sure. Yeah.
As it turns out.
Yeah, with landing as a nanosecond. Although that's a kind of a corollary to how to not crash. So, yeah.
Yeah, let's not crash the plane.
Yeah, indeed. Let's give us a little Andy update, Johnny. How did he pass any significant milestones recently or anything?
He's a little crawling fool now, actually.
Yeah, I saw some videos. He's a little scooter.
Yeah, he just figured out he's not good at crawling yet, but he's good at like scooting on his belly, and so he'll just like flop all around like a fish.
So he doesn't
That's
have
pretty
like the
amazing.
hands and knees thing down. He's just kind of pulling himself with his arms and pushing himself with his feet.
He's working on it.
Okay.
He can get his record is 5 regular crawling steps in a row, and then he collapses. He also just rolls around constantly. You'll like turn around and he's rolled all the way across the room.
His preferred
He's figured out that
method-
rolling is more efficient.
His preferred
Yeah, it's more efficient for him than crawling straight in a line. So he'll just turn sideways to his target and then just roll to it.
It's his preferred method of locomotion is rolling.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah.
That's pretty good.
He looks so silly when he does it too. He's just all arms and legs going like blarp, 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 just like flopping across the floor. It's great.
It's pretty funny. Yeah, I've seen him like legit
Yeah.
plank before too. I know he's strong. He's just got to figure it out, I guess. Yeah.
He's a strong little bugger.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. Awesome. He's gonna
Yeah.
he's gonna be getting a cousin in about what? 3 months?
Don't
Something like
ask
that?
me.
I don't know, something like
I think
that.
it's about 3 months.
Yeah,
Yeah,
not too long.
Yeah,
So,
it's gonna be cool. He's
all
gonna
kinds
be
of
a little
developments.
big cousin.
Yeah, indeed.
Oh yeah.
Well, cool. That's pretty awesome. Anyway, as far as writing goes, we have a couple things to talk about today, in addition to just kind of a general update. And like I said, I've been flight training a lot, but I did kind of run into a couple things I wanted to talk about today. But I'll let John start. Anything in your own writing that you wanted to mention? Anything Wow, let's try that again.
Oh boy.
Anything significant?
Get your words together.
Yes, quite.
A lot of kind of more the same for me for the most part. The new pattern for my writing is come across a scene that I don't quite know what to do with yet, take 2 or 3 days and figure out what I want to happen, and then write a scene, and then repeat the process over and over again. So I think that's not a great process. I think it's a little slow. So hopefully once I kind of get more momentum going, we'll get back to the point where I was just like cranking out chapters like crazy. But more planning required at this point, it seems. But still pushing forward, getting close to 40,000 words, which is crazy to me. Like that's nuts.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so good stuff for the most part. Just a little slower than it has been, but hopefully that'll fix itself soon.
Nice. Yeah, I've been kind of doing something similar, I guess. Still working on the outline mostly. I haven't really zoomed into any scenes in the prose or anything like that, at least in a while. There were some scenes that I wrote a while back that I was going over and got some ideas from those and Because man, when you have an idea like this for so long, you have ideas that are great, and then you have another idea that you kind of get entranced by, and follow that rabbit hole a little bit, and then that kind of dead ends, and you forget to go back to the really good idea you had before, but that also seemed to go nowhere at the time. But maybe you can connect those now, and there's a lot of that going on still. But I kind of my biggest problem is I've got the beginning now pretty down. I know where I want to start. I know what's led up to that part. In fact, I might even go back and write that as a prologue, or maybe even an actual beginning to the book rather than where I'm starting writing, because that doesn't have to be the same thing. But I know where I want to start out. I know what's led up to that, but I don't really know where it's going still. Because this whole idea started with this sort of chosen one story arc with something to do with breaking the binding that magic has to the elements, so that all this kind of stuff, this big world type thing. But at some point along the way, I decided to shrink it down, make it a much smaller story about different characters, and maybe set up that chosen one original idea for another sort of sequel. But for this one, not even really thinking about that too much at this point. So it was kind of this weird thing where I started with that long-term goal, got rid of that long-term goal, still in the same world though, and the same magic system and a lot of the same elements, but I didn't have that story plot point that I was driving at the whole time anymore, because that's no longer part of this story. I still might set that up, but that's not even going to be the thrust of this first book. If anything, this will be a trilogy that sets up a different thing later on, which I can finagle in the editing process if I want to later. But so yeah, I've been trying to figure out where it's going, and I finally kind of got at least another stepping stone along the way, just today actually, because I knew that at the start of the story, their father, the main character's father, is in exile, and they eventually want to go get him. But I didn't really have a connection or a way to connect them where they start and them going to get their dad, because it's kind of it's a long way. I don't know what's going to happen along the way. I can't just jump from them being here to way over there. It needs to be part of an overall story with an adventure that reinforces the theme that I'm going for and all that kind of stuff. So I finally figured out sort of the next step after the beginning of the story by taking a character who I thought would show up sort of at the end of Act 1 and making it so that they actually have to go get that character, which turns out to be, well, I don't know if I want to even say because I don't even know yet, but I have a pretty good idea. But yeah, basically they need to go get this other person, and then they'll have sort of themselves set up to go to that last plot point, which is getting their dad, at least from a purely plot point of view, which is just the series of events that happens. In terms of the theme and narrative and the character journeys and arcs, that still has some weaving to do on that point, but at least I have the skeleton of the plot that I can then pile all that on top of now, so that's good. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah, once you kind of turn that corner, often it leads to like, oh, and then I can do this, and then I can do this. Like, once you kind of push that roadblock aside, it gets a lot easier to sort of start putting more pieces together.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm still, not 100% happy with everything, but I'm getting better at just pushing through and getting to that next anchor point almost in the story, so that I can hang everything off of that, or at least start constructing something. Then I can go back and do some surgery and reconstruct it if I need to, but I've got at least something there now, so that's good, yeah.
The feeling of coming up with something that you don't love 100% but is good enough is like a very familiar experience now for me.
Yeah, which is good.
Like every time I write a new scene.
Yeah, the more you do anything, the easier it gets, and that's just something you got to practice, and I think we're getting better at it for sure. Man, it's hard though.
Yeah.
It's still so hard.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel good.
Like every scene I've written lately, my wife will ask, like at the end of a writing session, my wife will ask me like, so what do you think of what you did? Every time I'm like, it's good. It's fine. Like, it's not like, I don't know if I'm 100% in love with it, but I'm getting better at just going like, okay, it's there. And as long as there's story that gets me to the next thing, then eventually I'll have a book, and then we can make it good. I just need to write it. Just need to get this thing done.
Yeah, I mean, I was listening to again another Brandon Sanderson lecture like a week ago, I guess. I kind of got back into those a little bit because he came out with some new ones, so I went back and watched some of the old ones as well. And he was talking about how he doesn't want his students in his class to start the class by continuing a project they've already been working on. He wants them to start something completely new, because when you're a new writer and you've never really done it before, but you've done a lot of what we've done, which is like world building and plotting and having big ideas and like, oh man, this will be a great idea for a story someday when I write it. If you don't know how to write, it's easy to like let your passion for that one story idea lead you into just trying over and over and over again and like hammering your head into the wall trying to get that to work the first time you've ever tried to write something, rather than practicing kind of with a different concept. Like come up with something completely new that you're not, hanging your hat on so much, that you're not just 100% in love with, and just try something. Just try to come up with a new story and write it. And there's no pressure. It's just something completely new. You don't have to publish it or anything afterwards. It's just like take the pressure off yourself. And I think there might be something to that, because I think that I've definitely been thinking about this a lot in the past few weeks, that this story in particular has been with me for so long in one form or another that I'm almost like paralyzed by how much I want it to work. You know what I mean? Because I don't have the skills yet to actually make it work in the way I want it to, or make it as good as I want to yet. And that means I don't want to put anything on paper, which again is the tendency we're trying to fight, and practice getting through that. And you can always go back and all that kind of good stuff. And I think I'll keep working on it. But I think there is something to, maybe for the folks at home, if you're thinking about trying to start a story or start writing something, maybe even as a result of listening to this podcast, who knows? Maybe try something that you haven't had a big idea about for a long time, and start with something completely new that you're not pressuring yourself to finish or pressuring yourself to make perfect, all that kind of good stuff, and just kind of go with it. See where your new idea takes you. I mean, some of the most famous books in the world, or in the past couple decades, at least. Like I'm pretty sure Jim Butcher with his what is his big famous series called?
Dresden Files?
Yeah, Dresden Files kind of started with that. His writing instructor basically told him that, and he came up with basically what became the Dresden Files, and that kind of thing. So yeah, it might be a good just tip. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, and that's something that I've appreciated about my own writing. Like I've said, I still don't know where my book is going to end yet. It's a totally new idea to me, and so it's easier to start putting stuff on paper for that, I think, because I have zero expectations of what it could be. So it's just, let's just see what happens when I write this thing.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, anyway, that's kind of what I've been working on last week or so. Do you want to go ahead and transition into what you wanted to talk about today?
For sure. So I am an avid Lord of the Rings fan.
Not just you. Not just you.
We, but mostly me.
Hey.
No, we're both avid Lord of the Rings fans and always have been. And I have read the books, but it's been a very long time. And I certainly haven't read them as an adult, and I feel like a bad fan for that. And so I finally decided, okay, I'm gonna read Lord of the Rings, the trilogy. And it's been a surprising experience. About halfway through the first book so far. It's been a surprising experience in a lot of ways. One of them is there's a lot more singing than I remember.
Yeah,
sing
for sure.
Constantly. It's like Frodo will be walking along on the way to Bree or something and just go like, "Hey Sam, why don't you sing us a song?" Like, no, don't sing another song. Gosh darn it.
Shut up.
And then Aragorn sings, and Bilbo sings all the time. And Frodo sings, and everybody sings songs. It's just, and then Tom Bombadil speaks nothing but song.
Tom Bombadil. Oh my gosh.
I'm listening to it on an audiobook, and it's kind of funny. You can tell that when there's a song, they cut to a different microphone for the guy who's reading the audiobook, and it's like a different take. And in a different room with a different microphone, it sounds completely different, and then it goes back to the story, like reading again. It's so interesting. Yeah, it's funny to me. But anyway, that's the first observation. Second one, I don't know why. I think it was because I read them as a kid. I expected them to be kind of boring, for some reason. I think I have that kind of stigma that the Lord of the Rings books are a little bit dry, and I haven't actually found that to be true as an adult. I've really enjoyed them so far. They're narratively gripping, obviously, and it's a different experience than watching the movies, and it's just really good. It's been a really fun experience, and I look forward to listening to more, like every time I get the chance to. So I kind of had this kind of stigma just because I read them as a kid when adult fiction was very boring to me in a certain way that I was expected to find them more dry, and they're not. So if you are so inclined, give them a chance. I think you'll find them more interesting than you think you might.
Yeah.
The third. Oh, go ahead.
No, you finish first.
Okay. The third thing I wanted to mention is that I have clarified a new reason for myself why I dislike the Hobbit movies so much.
Just one?
And what?
Just one reason?
A new reason.
Oh.
A new reason. I have a multitude.
Okay.
But a new reason. And when you read Lord of the Rings, the books, you come across lines from the movie all the time. But it isn't just in the moment when they were used in the movie. Like, there are lines that Gandalf speaks to Frodo in Hobbiton in the book that are spoken from Gandalf to Frodo in Moria in the movie.
Yeah.
But what's meaningful about that is that you're getting so much of the language that Tolkien wrote. These lines are written not by script writers; they're written by Tolkien himself, whether or not they're placed in the correct spot, quote unquote, in the film. But there's a quality of the writing that comes through in that regard, and in the language that's used. What you find in the Hobbit movies is it's basically, in terms of the dialogue, it's almost completely cut. What's the expression? Cut from whole cloth? Is that what it is?
What?
Whatever.
I don't know what you're trying to say.
They're fabricated. They made up all the dialogue for the Hobbit movies because there wasn't enough source material to pull the dialogue out of, and so the movies have this deep foundation on a line-by-line level for the Lord of the Rings movies, the original trilogy. There's a line-by-line level of reliance on Tolkien's original source material in the dialogue that is just not existent in the Hobbit movies, and you can feel the difference in the quality from it, and I never quite understood that.
Well, I mean, so much more respect and love for the source material just shines through in the original Lord of the Rings trilogy than it does in The Hobbit, and that's for a lot of different reasons, whether that's, studio, meddling, or just timelines being crunched, everything that Guillermo del Toro did being thrown out, and Peter Jackson starting from scratch, all that kind of stuff, and him not wanting to even really work on it. A bunch of different things could be talked about there for sure. But yeah, I think that is probably a part of that sort of thing. Yeah, that makes sense. And I was going to ask you though too, on this sort of line of thinking, are there any significant differences you're noticing from the book to the movie? It's been I've read, of course, all the Lord of the Rings books, and I've actually tried to go back and read them several times as an adult, not in the last 6 or 7 years probably, but like right after college or maybe at the end of college, and then for the first few years of my 20s, I probably tried it a few times, and I never really got much further than halfway through the first book. Not because I didn't enjoy it. I would always really enjoy picking it up and reading it again, but I think that was kind of during the time where I was getting so busy with music and everything that it was getting harder and harder to find time to read, and so it just kind of petered out after a while. Then I'd forget everything that happened and have to start from the beginning, and I just kind of got tired of doing that over and over again. But I'll have to look up the audiobook because I've actually never listened to it on audiobook. But anyway, it's been a while for me since I've read it. What are some significant differences you're noticing from the book to the movie?
The biggest difference for me is the way Frodo's quest gets started. In the movie, they have to time crunch it pretty hard. And honestly, I think they do a great job in doing that. You never feel like it's awkward or rushed, really, in the movie. But in the book, it's a lot slower and more complicated.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Frodo gets, Gandalf comes back from, it takes 10 years between Bilbo's birthday party. And I think it's actually more than that. I want to say it's 17 years between Bilbo's birthday party and the start of the quest.
Yeah, because doesn't Frodo
Gandalf
turn
finally...
the Hobbit equivalent of 18 on Bilbo's 111th birthday, and then it's when he's in his 50s or something that the quest actually starts?
Yeah. It's a long time later. And then when Gandalf comes back, he's like, this is the One Ring, and, we have to do X, Y, Z. And so Frodo's like, okay, let's make a plan. And so they plan, for months later, Frodo to...
He's going to sell his house and then go fake his name.
Sell his house and pretend to move to Buckland.
Yeah, that's right.
Pretends to move to Buckland. And then Merry meets him there to, help him get settled in his fake house and set up a fake person to live there. And then... they're going to go meet Gandalf over here, and then from there go to Rivendell or something. It's this whole process that's set up, and it takes a while for the whole company to get together. And then it's also emphasized more so that Merry and Pippin join Frodo and Sam on their adventure just because they love Frodo so darn much.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're really, all really good friends, and then when it comes time for them to split ways, they're all like, no, we knew about your whole plot this whole time, and we're going to join you, and can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
Like, the quest starts so differently. And then Aragorn's plot, or character line is pretty different in the books. Partly because he already carries Narsil from the beginning of the story.
Oh, that's right.
And there's just different implications from that. Obviously, something minor like Glorfindel being the one to come and take Frodo to Rivendell.
Yeah.
On the horse instead of Arwen. But I think that was a good choice for the movie.
Yeah, I mean,
it's kind of irrelevant.
All the Lord of the Rings movies, the original ones, are such a masterclass in how to adapt a book to a movie.
It's brilliant.
Or one form to another, rather, and how to distill the story into its essential components and still get the same impact and the same feel and the same, the same story for all intents and purposes, even though it's a completely different medium, and really preserve what's really essential to that story through that adaptation, which is not an easy thing to do. My wife has been working, I actually want to have her on the podcast sometime soon. She's been working on just that, an adaptation of a book in the screenplay format for someone, and it's been such an interesting process to kind of help her with at times and see her go through and struggle to adapt or leave out certain things but still keep the same message. And it's such a hard book to adapt to because it's about some pretty deep themes and connectedness between these very different characters and how their stories intersect, and it's been really interesting to see her do that. That would be an interesting thing to have her come on and talk about, actually. She'd be really interested in that, I think.
Yeah. And I think part of that adaptation success is due to the fact that they reuse so many lines from the book, even if it's not in places where it's relevant. I mean, you know the song that Pippin sings in The Return of the King to Denethor, like the home is behind, the world is ahead, you know, that song, that takes place in like the first third of the first book.
Yeah.
That song is actually there.
Yeah.
And they didn't have a use for it there, but they reused so much of Tolkien's original language, and they put it somewhere else so that it's brilliant the way they constructed it. And as I finish the books, like when I finish Fellowship of the Ring, I'm gonna go back and I have all the movies extended edition on Blu-ray, so I'm pretty cool. But I'm gonna, as I finish the books, I'm gonna go back and watch the movies and pick out the differences for myself and sort of appreciate. It's amazing to me that the books and the movies are both excellent pieces of art, and you can enjoy them individually, and they're completely different. Like it's amazing what each of them are, and what Peter Jackson did to make those into movies. And it stuns me, the difference in quality between them and the Hobbit movies. It is drastic.
Yeah, it is pretty jaw-dropping, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
It's not a good thing.
Not a good thing at all.
Not the best.
Yeah, I mean, Lord of the Rings was such an integral part for so many people, ourselves included. Kind of probably the first big epic fantasy we ever really saw, at least. I think we read some a little bit before that, but not much. I mean, that was kind of the thing that solidified for me that fantasy can tell an amazing story, and you know, that's what I want to do. I mean, that's the sort of story I want to tell. And of course, Lord of the Rings does kind of I don't know. I think people can get misled by it because not all fantasy is like Lord of the Rings. That's kind of a specific genre of fantasy that is a little bit older now, actually, and not as in vogue. I think some people can get turned off by that because they can see it as a little cliche or whatever. But man, it's such a masterclass in how to tell that sort of story, you know, very effectively, both in the book and in the movies, for sure.
Yeah, one thing you said there, how Lord of the Rings was sort of the thing that showed us that you can tell an amazing story through that sort of that fantasy genre. What's fascinating about that is that's what Tolkien did with the books when he released them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
He sort of brought back the adult fairy story, as he called it. Like he published them, and some things he said essentially amounted to the fact that he believed that adults did want to read fairy stories, and he wanted to write a fairy story that adults would want to read, and that's exactly what he did. And it serves that same story, although I think more the movies than the books. Still serves that exact same purpose so many years later, and it's just so fascinating to me that the story is so powerful that it does that in the same way the book did so many years later.
Yeah, totally. And I think there's been kind of a resurgence of that with Game of Thrones and everything recently, and of course they're not didn't end best, I guess, but there was that resurgence for 10 years or so of interest in fantasy as a storytelling medium, especially in film, because it's so expensive to make a fantasy film. I mean, there's not a lot of studios that'll make the risk or take the risk of making something like that. But then The Witcher came out recently, and there's a few other cool things kind of coming out, and so hopefully we'll get more of that kind of thing in the near future. Maybe we'll replace Star Wars for some actual good fantasy storytelling. We'll see.
Is the Witcher show any good?
It's very good. I think we talked about it a few weeks ago, but
did we?
The more I've thought about it, because I have read all the books and I've played the game, and I'm actually playing through the game again, as I talked about a few weeks ago. And the books are really amazing. The game is really, really amazing. The show is just good. The show is solid. It's a solid adaptation for the most part.
It's like The Mandalorian.
It's better than The Mandalorian, more consistently, I think. I think The Mandalorian has higher highs, but also lower lows in terms of quality. There's some really great stuff in The Mandalorian, but there's a lot of episodes that are just kind of like, okay. Whereas The Witcher, I pretty much liked every episode, although there were a lot of things, the more I think about it, that actually aren't great about it. Whether that's changing certain character traits or even appearances without really any justification, including some character arcs that really didn't need to be included, adding some from that weren't in the books that didn't need to be there, all that kind of stuff. Just nitpicky things that kind of add up. But overall, I still really enjoyed it, and if you're a fan of the books or the games, I think you'll really like it. I could definitely talk more about that, but if you haven't seen it, it'd be pretty boring.
Oh, yeah. Also, speaking of excellent narratives in video games, I just finished the game The Last of Us.
Oh, my gosh.
Excuse me. It is excellent. The storytelling is so good. And
I would love
highly recommended.
Playing that game really made me want to someday write for a video game, which would be a really crazy, weird experience, I'm sure. I don't know how you go about doing that, because, I mean, obviously there's this whole other dimension to writing for a video game than there would be with any sort of purely visual or even literary medium, because you have to account for player agency, the mechanics of the game, all this kind of stuff that's not part of the narrative itself, but that you ideally want to integrate into the narrative, which I think they did perfectly in The Last of Us. I think Witcher 3 is another great example, but Last of Us, I think, probably actually tops The Witcher for my favorite narrative in a video game of all time, I would think. Because it's actually manages to be pretty cinematic, because it's not really a very open world, multiple choice kind of game. You have more open sections that you can explore and get things and craft things and get materials, but there's a very linear path you're supposed to take, which is fine. Not every game has to be super open, multiple choice, that kind of stuff, but it really is the best example of a more on rails type game, narratively speaking. Probably the best one of those I can think of.
Yeah, it kind of, for a while, what I've enjoyed playing are the more open world kind of games, and the last game I played was Borderlands 3, and then I played Last of Us, and they're so different that they're not even the same thing. They're not
you almost
even
can't compare them.
You can't look at them the same way,
because they're not trying to do the same thing.
No, the Borderlands 3 is trying to be, you can explore anything you want to, go to different planets and find 1,000 different guns and shoot aliens. Like, that's its own concept. The Last of Us is saying, here, you can play a game which is also a really good movie, and you get to feel that story, and it's going to be really great.
And you'll feel all the feels.
It's an amazing experience.
It really is. And even the acting and everything, I mean, it's amazing that you can have actors, like, portraying characters in a video game and actually like getting a performance that actually tugs at your heartstrings and like comes through the motion capture and all that. And they've only come even farther in the last 5 years or so. I think the second one of that
Last
series
of Us
is coming out soon.
Years old.
Yeah, I mean it was made originally for the last generation of systems, and I think it's the remaster that you just played on the PS4. So that's even more impressive. Yeah, if any of you are into video games and haven't played The Last of Us and appreciate good stories, I mean, you're really missing out. It's incredible. Look at the behind the scenes videos too that they have about the motion capture stage they used, and like the actual shoot of the actors, and basically just doing the scenes and in their mocap suits and everything, and it's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, if it's any testament to how good it is, I'm pretty much like a pansy when it comes to like sort of zombie survival pseudo horror type genre games. And I texted Vito like after my first couple sessions playing it. I said, "This game has a bunch of nope moments for me where I just go, nope, I don't do not want. Please take me out of game.
You want me to go
no,
into
thank
that
you.
flooded basement with no lights and shoot some zombies? No.
Nope. I'm going and playing Borderlands now because it's safe.
Eventually, though, like the story hooks you so
despite
much that you're willing. Like it really puts you in that character mindset too. Like the character doesn't want to do this. Like they're scared, but they have this drive to do it because they care about the other character they're trying to save or whatever they're trying to do. And you have the same mindset because now you've been drawn into the story and you care about that character or their goal that they're trying to accomplish so much, and you're right there with them.
Exactly.
You know? It's really brilliantly done.
It's so well done, and I highly recommend it. Go play it. And the sequel's coming out soon, so now's your time.
Ah, I'm so excited. I'm going to use my gift card from Christmas to get that one. Anyway.
Anywho,
anything else you wanted to cover today, John?
No, that's all and all I had and more.
Yeah, me too. I think so. Anyway, thank you guys for listening. John still has to do his thing, actually. I should probably let him do that.
I do have to do my thing, so... If you enjoy the show, you can find us on social media. On most of the basic social media platforms, we're just World Builders Anonymous. Although I think on Twitter, we're actually WBA Podcast. So you can find us there for whatever mediocre content we're posting on those platforms.
Hey, that's mostly me.
Email us. Well, double down on the mediocre then. I apologize. Yeah, sorry about that. Anyway, you can email us at wbapodcast@gmail.com with anything from comments or critiques or questions to writing samples that you would like us to look over. We'd be happy to do that. You can leave us a review on iTunes. We're obviously World Builders Anonymous there. You can look up a guide on how to leave an iTunes review because it is the most absurdly, unnecessarily complicated process I can imagine. And then we have a website also, WBA Podcast. No, sorry. Forget that I said that. We have a website, worldbuildersanonymous.com, where we post things like articles and maybe in the future book reviews. And you guys will hopefully enjoy some of the content we have up there. And I think that's all. I did it.
Cool. Good luck with tax season, everyone. And yeah, that's all I got.
So, goodbye. Ba-da-dum.